What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your usual host, Scott Weatherly, and I am being joined by a special guest today. And a special guest for a special reason. We're continuing our Ghostbusters retrospective, and I've had someone different in for each episode. I had James in to do Ghostbusters 1984. I had Max in to do 1989 Ghostbusters 2, and I've now got Rhea Carrigan in to do Ghostbusters 2016. And I'm bringing Rhea in for a special reason because Rhea, as well as having a chest infection that is still soldiering on like the true hero she is the host and presenter of Femme on Film. And really, who better to talk about I'm going to put it in inverted commas, the controversy around Ghostbusters 2016, and actually then comment on the film. So Rhea, how are you doing? You okay?
Hello. We're not allowed to laugh because laughing makes me cough. So this can only be a serious discussion.
I'm all down for that. Yeah. Very academic, very serious, very dry.
Very serious. I will apologise that people will hear me coughing, drinking, and having throat sweets. So I apologise to everyone in advance.
Okay, whatever gets you through. That's what we need.
Yeah, you know.
So this kind of conversation can happen.
Just keeping it real.
That's it.
As
yeah.
J-Lo would say.
That's it.
Raw, yeah.
But you on because you are obviously the host of Femme on Film, new podcast. And I've only listened to. Is only one release?
There's only one episode, so
yeah, Josie and the Pussycats.
Yes.
I now have it rented, and I'm ready for. We wasn't able to show Ellie this weekend because we were away, but it's there and ready to go. I'm quite looking forward to it based on your review.
So excited. Have you ever seen it before?
I haven't. No, well, no, I tell a lie. I think I may have done. It's one of those films that I fear was in the background at some point. Like I saw the trailer and I was like, I recognize some of this. I'm sure I've seen this. So
yeah,
but it's been a very, very long time. I may have seen it once when it was first on DVD or something like that. So
yeah,
I'm quite looking forward to going back to it.
Very excited. I'm excited to see what Ellie thinks as well.
Yeah, she's 8, so she'll be all sort of.
Sparkles. Well,
yeah,
I don't know that's very gendered, but that's because I love sparkles.
Yeah.
So no, I presume everybody loves sparkles.
She'll be just like, badass musicians. Like that's. I did attempt, although I did then show her the trailer to Spice World. And her response to that was more like, what is this nonsense?
Which, I mean, is the correct response.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Like, it's not about whether the films are good or bad, although Josie and the Pussycats is good. It's about how the world responded to them. So I'm hoping to cover Spice World because I like Spice World in that ironic way, I guess, although I hate people who say that. Oh my God, do I hate myself? Existential crisis.
You're getting into a spiral now.
Yeah. I think it's silly, it's fun, it is what it is. It is not a good film. No, it is not.
I think it lives in the context of the time as well, though. I think it's one of those.
Absolutely.
If you watch it completely out of context now, like that film makes no sense.
So random. Does it even have a plot? I can't even remember the plot.
I don't believe it does. It's a bit. I think it was meant to be like set up a bit like a Beatles film, wasn't it? Where it's like,
yes,
it's the four sort of Spice Girls doing their thing. I think there may be like a vagary of a plot, something to do with a tour or something. I seem to remember. And Richard E. Grant's in it as the villain.
Richard E. Grant's in it, yeah.
I love Richard E. Grant. He appears in like the weirdest things.
I think he's just having a whale of a time. I think he's like, yeah, that sounds fun. Off I go.
Yeah, he's one of those, I think, ever since he's like Whitnell and I, it's like, right, I can do serious stuff, or I can just do whatever the hell I want and, enjoy doing it. So, yes, he is the king of camp, the Prince of Panto. I do like Richard E. Grant. Anyway, we're here today to talk about Ghostbusters. We're going to talk about Ghostbusters 2016. And I've agreed. I'm going to call it. It's female Ghostbusters. Now, we're going to start at the beginning before we get to the film, because more so than many films, we've gone through a thing of late, and this happens in the nerdosphere, as it were. Characters get gender flipped.
Mm-hmm.
It happens, especially in comics. We get it. It happens quite a lot. You've had female Thor and She-Hulk. I mean, She-Hulk's been around for decades, but you get these things where Spider-Man's gone through it. You've now got Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman. You've got like a whole plethora of sort of the Spider family, and in DC, it's done the same sort of thing. Sometimes it goes, almost unnoticed, and the fans find it, and it's all good. Sometimes, though, it seems to cause a massive controversy for some odd reason. And I've never understood why some do and some don't. Like, I think maybe sometimes it's context. Like, for example, in the most recent What If, there was Captain Carter. So the character of Agent Carter was turned into the super soldier rather than Steve Rogers. And no one seemed to care. There was none of this sort of there was no backlash to it. Maybe it's because she was a consistent character to it. She was a great character in it. No backlash. Not that I saw. Yet also, they're talking about a She-Hulk TV show, and people are going, I've seen people going nuts about it. Oh, gender flipping, go woke and go broke. You're like, you don't even know the comics because She-Hulk's been around since the 80s. It's bizarre how people react to these things.
So I don't have any fully formed theories, more probably rants about it. But I think one aspect of it is how much you can, as a male audience, you can fancy a character.
Yes.
So I think if there's a gender flip and it's for a hot young woman who's going to be in sexy clothes being sexy, I think audiences tend to be okay with that. When it's things like Ocean's 8 and it's sort of older, more people from diverse backgrounds, or Ghostbusters 2016 or She-Hulk, when it's not young, hot, blonde women running around looking hot. I think that definitely contributes to it. I've got no evidence behind it, but that's one of the themes that I see, that it's when it's not there for the male gaze, for the male viewer, I think that tends to get a lot of backlash. I also think when it's something like, we even saw this with Captain Marvel, didn't we? That people fancy Brie Larson, but they don't like her being strong, powerful, the most powerful character in the Marvel universe. They don't like that.
Yeah.
If she could just be Captain Marvel and not be so badass and cool and all of those sort of things, that would be acceptable.
Yeah. I think you have a really good point. And Captain Marvel is a really good example of this. She's almost like a microcosm of it. Because obviously before she was Captain Marvel, she was Ms. Marvel. And when she was Ms. Marvel, she basically went around in a swimsuit and thigh-high boots.
Yeah.
And not even like a good swimsuit, not one that's providing much support as far as I can see. And then obviously she became Captain Marvel and was given the full bodysuit, and there was less about the Carol Danvers all of a sudden became a legit. It sounds like she wasn't legit, but she became like a legit. She became like a legit female centric superhero. Before there'd clearly been that element of titillation in there.
Yeah.
And you're right. There was this sort of thing of there was this backlash of oh, not my hashtag, not my
exactly
Marvel. And then but then there was the Carol Corps and all these women that came out, and you see all these great cosplayers and stuff. And then it led to obviously the new Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, and you sort of again there was backlash there, and you're like, hang on, she's just a kid, she's a kid superhero, she's not meant to appeal to some 40-year-old men. She's supposed to appeal to a 16-year-old girl. That's the target audience. It always baffles me when people get irate about this stuff.
It's definitely a powerful wound thing, because we see, we saw it with Rey. When Rey's first introduced, all we got is, oh, she's such a Mary Sue. She's such a Mary Sue. Now, when were people sitting around saying that about Luke Skywalker? Nobody cared. Yeah. Because he's a man and he gets to play with light swords. Yeah. But Rey comes in, and I mean, let's not talk about how much they ruin Rey over the course of the 3 films, but she comes in and it was amazing for me as a woman, seeing her having loved Star Wars my entire life. seeing her and being like, cool, yeah, she can just use the Force. She can just access her powers.
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a shit. It's Star Wars. I don't need like 50 films of her learning to train. Like Luke didn't get to do that. But it's the exact same sort of thing. There's just the misogynistic male audience just cannot handle that shit. It just makes them lose their minds.
Yeah.
And I always find that people say, oh, it's like a small corner of the internet and all of these sort of things. It's not. It's the world we live in. We live in a patriarchal society. So it's in everything that we do. And it's just a reflection of society as a whole. Some people just happen to be vocalizing it very loudly.
It's weird, and I think that all my listeners, everyone listening will know I'm about to turn 40 soon. I'm a white male.
Oh, me too. Not the white man. I'm a white woman who's about to turn 40.
Yeah, it's the best. Life begins at 40. Podcasting begins at 40. Yes. But yeah, like one of the things I've learned is when I was a kid, when I was a lot younger, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was that thing of the requirement for the titillation, the requirement for those different bits and pieces. Like, you're a kid, you're driven by your hormones. I was driven with the brain in a different head. It's one of those things as a kid or when you're younger. And then as I got older, you sort of, maybe it's because I'm specifically grumpy about things. I don't know. But then I'm like, why should I be annoyed like about Spider-Woman or Rey or like, I'm more annoyed about the fact, like you say, that the second two of the sequel trilogy are shit. But that's a different issue. That's about filmmakers and stuff, not a specific character. Mm-hmm. Like Daisy Ridley did not contribute it's not her fault those films are crap. There's a whole host of factors. But I came out of The Force Awakens being like, yeah, this is ace. Like, I love that. And there's other things like there's TV shows where people sort of go like, I can't watch Supergirl, or other example of that. And I go, that's fine. Don't watch it then. Well, don't hate on it. Just don't watch it. Like, it's not for you.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a CW show. It's not for you. Like, I know it's not for me. I've watched a couple of episodes and I've gone, it's all right. It's not for me. Move on.
Absolutely.
And I just find
you don't have to shit on things you don't like. I mean, sometimes it's really fun.
Yeah.
But it still needs to be done in like a proper critical manner.
Yes.
Don't just shit on things for the sake of shitting on things.
No, I hate something is not a criticism.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to count up to 10. I hate when people say that. And it's one of the things, again, I hear it on things, I see it in things, I read it, where people are just like, I think this is bad because I didn't like it. And you're like, all right, that's fine. I saw it with Halloween Kills, like the Halloween franchise. Like, you see people, I saw reviews and that are like, I don't like this because I don't like horror films. And you go, well, then you were never going to like it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's baffling to me, this whole thing.
And Tony and I talk about that in the Femme on Film episode about Josie and the Pussycats, that it's, especially when it comes to critics or people or writers, that they need to take themselves out of that world. And it's not about whether they like it or not. It's not about whether it appeals to them or not. It's about the film or the piece of media critically as a whole, that you've just got to separate yourself. And I think that doesn't happen.
Yes.
As much as it should. I think it does happen quite a lot, but it doesn't happen as much as it should. And I think, we'll explore that when we talk about Ghostbusters 2016 as well.
It's a rule that, on the sister podcast, Stories Out of Time and Space, Julie and I have it as a rule. Like, if we are going to criticize something, we have to give it a justification. We can't just be like, I hate it. Like, it's got to be, well, why don't you like it? What didn't work? Did it, that sort of thing? Why doesn't it hold together? And there are things, don't get me wrong, like, I'm not going to be stood here praising 2016's Ghostbusters as a masterpiece. Like, it has problems.
Yeah, we've discussed, I'm not a particular fan of it.
Yeah. And so we are going to discuss that. But we are going to discuss the problems rather than just saying, it sucks. So anyway, but let's get to the controversy. So that the casting of this and also the director, because I think they are two specific things. So in 2016, or before 2016, I think it was early 2016. So I think this came out in about June. This was a summer film, June, July time. The trailer dropped, and obviously then there was the announcement and all this other stuff. You were going to get this cast. It's all SNL alums. Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Kate McKinnon, and
Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones. I was about to call her Patty, and then I was like, no, I know her name. Christ. And obviously then Chris Hemsworth, and then you've got all these others that we know. There's a couple of others that obviously pop up from other sketch shows in SNL. These are all competent comedians. That, you know, they're good in other things. Like every single one of these, I've seen something else. I've gone, they're really good, and they have their moments in this. But it's also Paul Feig or Feig, I don't know how to pronounce this, brings his type of comedy to this, and it can be found in films like Spy, Bridesmaids. They're the ones I particularly think of. And then the question is, does that humor work in this context? Is one of the things that when I watched it this morning, I watched it last night and finished one. That's what was really suddenly in my head. Do the jokes land? Does it work?
I don't think they do. I think that's the biggest downfall of this film. I think it's one of the reasons I don't. It's not that I dislike it. I'm just very much sort of like, I think it's throwaway fun, and I do think it could have been better, not by removing the women. I think I don't think that separately they're bad. I think separately they're very good, but when you bring it together in this film, so I think when you get Paul, I never know, is it Feig?
I don't know. Yeah.
You know, I think, which is strange because I think his humor, his directing works incredibly well in Bridesmaids and Spy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work with the actors and the script in this film. And that's for me just where the biggest problem lies. I actively dislike Kate McKinnon in this film.
Oh, okay. I'm the opposite. I
like her in other things I've seen, but I do not like her in this film. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't hit. And I think that's because, I don't know, maybe she was allowed to improvise, but I don't feel like the humor's right for her. It just doesn't work for me at all. Not compared to Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig, who I think are doing an admirable job of holding up this film. I think they both absolutely have star power and are wonderful actresses. But I think there's just something that doesn't click.
I agree with that, and there's an interesting thing you say about those. I love Kate McKinnon. Like, I can watch anything.
She's hilarious.
Oh yeah, like I love her on SNL. There's a film called The Christmas Party, with Jason Bateman.
I was about to say the Jason Bateman film.
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston.
Yes,
and all that, and those, and she plays the head of HR in that, and she is fabulous in it. Like, she's absolutely fantastic. And so I love her when she pops up in all these kinds of films. And you're right, in this, like, she is off on one. Like, she's been given a lot of screen to do whatever she wants, and she makes the character her own. You know, she turned up with that haircut, inspired by the real Ghostbusters Egon. She brings a lot to that thing, and there are times where you're like, there are times legit where she's like, rein it in. You know, and I'm like, just rein that in. However, when it comes to, you know, the fight scene at the end in the street where they're fighting the ghosts, the bit where she's got the new weapons, and she's like, you know, she's got the two handguns or the hand proton guns. I love that. When she's sort of like, she's like, oh, I forgot my new toys, and then she licks the gun and she's like, let's go. Like, I think that's great. Like, it's so much fun. It's so silly, but it kind of works for me. But there are other times in this film where I'm just like, oh, please, just back a notch. Like, I
just feel like she's working really hard, and you can see that she's working. And I think maybe that's where, because I'm about to say the word work again, so I confused myself. That's why it's not working for me, because she's clearly trying to bring something, and I don't know if it's her or the script that's not letting the other one shine. But for me, I'm just like, I can see you working, and that doesn't make it funny for me.
This is interesting, right? We're going to get to this because I didn't want to make comparisons to the other, you know, the original, the OG Ghostbusters, but it's unavoidable, because there is a thing of like, well, why does that work for the most part, and this one and this cast doesn't? Like, say, when I've seen this cast elsewhere doing great stuff, like Melissa McCarthy, she's hit and miss for me. Like, I've seen her in some great stuff. The one she did with oh Christ, the cop, which is the cop with Sandra Bullock.
Oh yeah.
I really enjoy that. She's when she's in The Boss, like she's great. She's great. Like she can do some really good stuff. But in this one, again, like I feel that there's times when she's pushing it too hard again, and I'm like, again, like who's, for want of a better phrase, who's the Bill Murray in this situation?
Yeah.
Because they all get a moment to do it, all four of them, and it feels out of place. It's like they're all stars, and so they're all going to be equally crazy at some point. And I'm just like, no, you need to have it pulled back. And it's bizarre because it's the same with Kristen Wiig. Like I've seen Kristen Wiig again, like Bridesmaids is a good example. Even though I thought it was a terrible film, but Wonder Woman 84.
That's what I was about to say. I do not like that film at all.
No,
but she's bringing it in that film.
Yeah, her transformation and stuff, the dramatic roles that she has, she's great.
Yeah.
But she cannot find. I don't think she can find her feet in this. Like when she's trying to play this sort of like nerdy, the scene she has with Charles Dance at the beginning, most of those are good. And then all of a sudden it's like, is she meant to be awkward and incompetent? Is she supposed to be the awkward genius? Like, and then it's like they're inconsistent with the characters. They're never entirely sure what that character is.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. I think that's actually a really good point, that maybe the characters are less defined than in the original Ghostbusters. I actually think that's a really good point, because when you think about Kirsten Wiig specifically and you think about Bridesmaids, I mean, you probably didn't feel like this, but I watched Bridesmaids and I 100% was like, I understand who she is. She is the every woman character. We are her. We are in her shoes. I get it 100%. Like her performance in that as a woman is absolute genius, because every single woman I know who's seen that film has said, I am that character.
Oh, Alex loves it. Yeah, Alex loves that film.
Like,
yeah,
and it's like, well, we can't all be her, but we are, because there's something she brings to it that we have all experienced or been at that time or been on the receiving end of, or like, so she's clearly incredibly talented. And so thinking of that in context of this film is, why can't she find her feet? And actually, when you say that, none of the characters are as clearly defined as in the original Ghostbusters. And thinking about that now, what a shame. An absolute shame. And why didn't they deserve to have their characters more clearly defined?
Exactly. And that's where the only one that I feel is consistent as a character is Leslie Jones as Patty. Like, I think Patty throughout is, because she's not, it's clear Leslie Jones isn't looking to be, I don't know, she always feels spot on. Like she
read the brief and knew what she had to do and came in and did it. Yeah,
she was like, well, I'm not going to be the scientist. I don't have to be the crazy one. I'm going to be this character. And, even like when she does the stage dive and everyone gets out of the way, and she's like, I don't know if this is a race thing or a lady thing, but I'm as mad as hell. It's brilliant. Like, she makes me laugh. Like, the power of Patty compels me. All those lines that she has feel consistent. Like Patty is the only one that feels like a consistent character, and then I feel Kate McKinnon is going so far out that you're like, well, she's, she is Holtzman. The Holtzman is very much a thing, just a slightly different film. Maybe
Holtzman could have been so interesting if she'd brought something just a bit more. It's like she got briefed kooky and went, all right, I've got this.
I got it. Yeah.
But if there'd been something more offbeat maybe than kooky, like sort of like an imaginary backstory, right? Is she's incredibly smart, really into science. Nobody liked her because she was really into science, because that's what happens to most people, let alone women who are really into science. She had to work really hard to get where she is. So she's just, but she's obviously got like loads of personality and is really fun, because that is the thing I like about the character, like that she's really upbeat and happy, but not in sort of like, I find often in films with women, it's sort of like, I'm just perky and happy. I'm just going to sing songs. I love the sunshine. It's not that kind of happy. She's just like clearly a positive person. So like just just doing something with that, but also being like a bit socially awkward, trying to do the stuff they were trying to do with Kristen Wiig's character, for example. Maybe putting that into Holtzman could have been such a more interesting character.
I think you're right there, but I think this is it, isn't it? Like, when you look back at the original Ghostbusters, and I'm not making a comparison. I'm trying not to, but when you look back, like you say, for the previous films, I've commented on Harold Ramis, like as Egon. Like if you see Harold Ramis in, I've seen him in a couple of films, but like most notable is Stripes, with Bill Murray from 1982, I think, 81. He's a very different character. So when he picked this, when he wrote this with Dan Aykroyd, there was very much like, oh, no, this is what Egon is. He's the awkward one. You know, everyone just assumes, because this is probably what he's most known for. Yeah. Everyone goes, oh, that's what Harold Ramis is like. Oh, no, he's not. Like, you watch him when he does his sketch comedy. You know, he's from Second City and from, I think, SNL. So he did all that stuff. They were just like, that's Egon. Egon is, as you say, socially awkward. You know, nowadays you'd probably suggest he was on the spectrum, and I'm going to be careful about what I say about that. But like, you know, it's clearly there. Ray's that one that's upbeat, but like, you know, open-hearted about all this. He's he's a puppy dog. He sort of loves all this stuff. And then you got Venkman, who's the con man and the scumbag, and then you have Winston, who comes in as the everyman. Like, you know, he's the one. You've got this combination. You could identify each one of those characters. Yeah. And then when you watch this, I'm like, obviously, I'm a you know, as you say, I'm a 40-year-old male. I'm not supposed to really identify with them, but you can't. I struggle to identify them as characters. Yeah, I agree. And I think that they blur a little bit because they all seem to be looking to get the good lines or whatever, and so it sort of falls apart. And I feel most of it's between Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy. Yeah, which is a real shame. But yeah, that's it really, sort of about the you know, again, I don't want, they're not bad actresses, so I blame Paul Feig. Yeah, I do that, you know, he is the one with the power in this film, right? He's the one who's brought it to the table. He's brought the actors together. He's co-written the script. He's directing. I mean, I presume there's a producer credit in there as well. I probably should have checked that out. Yeah. And it's like, you know, he's the one who could have stepped in and said, no, this is how we're going to do it, you know, instead of, or stepped back and said, right, you as the actors, I trust you to go and do this. You're this character, you're that character, go and workshop that, bring it back to me. I just feel like there's a real lack of that control of coherence. It's one of those films where somebody needed to go, actually, we're doing this, and this is what you need to focus on, and this is what you need to deliver. Yeah. Rather than a series of skits, which of course it is because they're SNL. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just too many skits from one skit to another. I think, you know, that's another point to sort of say about this is, and you can say that about the other Ghostbusters films. We have talked about this, that there are parts that feel like a skit, like, you know, whether it be the Sedgwick Hotel where you first meet Slimer, and there are several moments in Ghostbusters 2, but they all sort of feel a part of the whole. But there's still moments in this. So one of the things I said is that we talked about when I talked about 84 in particular, is how economic that film is. Yeah. Like it fits into like 30 minutes, they're at the Sedgwick Hotel. You know, an hour and 5 or an hour and 10, they're coming into the finale. Like it's an hour and 40 long. It knows what it wants to do. It gets in, gets out, and does it. And for things like the weapons or the proton packs and the proton wands, like, you know, there's several drop lines. Like when they go to the Sedgwick, they get into the hotel and they're like, you know, I wish I'd tested the, you know, portable nuclear accelerator before I got into a lift. And then they turn it on and they sort of edge away. And then when they get on off the lift, they shoot the poor maid with the cart, and it all blows up and all that sort of stuff. And you're like, and it goes, oh, a successful test. And you're like, you get this feeling like, oh, they've rushed this. Like, you know, there's probably like Egon's probably done some stuff back home in the firehouse, but not a lot. This is the first time this has been field tested, and that's it. You just get this sense of it, and it doesn't need to crack on. But with 2016, there's a whole there's 2 scenes, in fact, where they test weapons. And I'm like, I don't need that. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to test the proton packs to show you know how they work when we use them to bring down the first ghost. Now we're going to introduce a whole load of other things at a secondary point, so you know what we've got for the finale. And it just sort of slows the film down. They try to make jokes, and it just lasts too long.
I've clicked what it is. It's poor world building.
Yes.
So again, I don't actually want to, like you, I don't want to do the comparison because I don't think it's fair, because I think there's lots of other films that do excellent world building. But as we're talking about Ghostbusters, I think it's easier. You know, the world building of the original Ghostbusters is, this is just the world.
Yes.
We don't need to convince the audience that this is the world. We don't need to prove to the audience that this is the world. We are telling them through our storytelling. Whereas in this film, it's very much the opposite. We are spoon feeding the audience that this is the world, that they then need to believe in this world to come along for the ride. And that's a failure in writing. That's not anything to do with the actors, it being an all-female cast. It is the writers not understanding how to do good world building. Yes. And I actually think that's, if you think about Paul Feig, I think you can see that in all of his films. None of his films ever do any world building, because they're all about a group of men sitting around together making jokes. There's like, in all of his films, there's like a very thin story.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works incredibly well. And obviously in this it hasn't. But I wonder if that's also because he's constrained by Ghostbusters. What if this had just been a film about women fighting ghosts? It didn't have to be under the Ghostbusters vehicle. It could just be about some paranormal specialists who happen to be funny and fighting ghosts. What if it wasn't about them setting themselves up as their team? What if they were already a team? You know, all of these things could have made it better. And I think that is also one of my annoyances about when films are redone or remade, or you know, it's because this isn't, they don't call it a remake, do they? It's like a reimagining, which is totally fine. I'm fully on board with.
Yeah, reboot or whatever. Yeah, reboot.
Yeah, it's when they do a gender flip. I'm generally on board with it. It's fine. Doesn't really bother me. But you need to also just make original films about women.
Yes.
And why couldn't have this just been that? Why did this have to be Ghostbusters?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Look, it was clear that they were going to do a Ghostbusters reboot. They were trying to bring it into the 21st century. And I'm quickly looking at his resume, like his back films, and again, it's that thing of like, he's done lots of them. Like he did some episodes. He's done a lot of TV. He did like episodes of The Office and Parks and Rec. He's done some bits, but like Bridesmaids, as we've said, you know, he directed it, wrote it, and I think, you know, I honestly think like I think it's all right. But I think I know
it's so good.
But I know. My wife loves it. I think it'll be held up as a comedy classic. I think it's a 21st century comedy classic. Like people will go to it in decades and be like, yeah, that's a film that you can identify with the era. And he did Spy, and he did do the other film. The Heat was the film I was thinking about with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy, that I really enjoyed. But both of those films, so Bridesmaids, as you said, it's
original.
It isn't original. It's like it's a rom-com about friends, and he gets that, and it's clear like that whole film works because of that, and because of the cast. Like he's got a great cast. And then The Heat is like a gender flip of a genre. It's the buddy cop film. So it's not a specific IP. It's just going, here's the tropes, and we're going to flip them. And the same as Spy, isn't it? It's like, it's a spy film. It's not. We're not making a female James Bond comedy. I am gender flipping the idea.
But Spy, I mean, the fact they are women in Spy is relevant to the plot. But Spy could also be men. It could also be men in those roles, and they tend to be the roles that are the best. You know, look at Alien, Ripley.
Yeah, I agree.
All of those sort of films, they tend to be the best films about women.
Yes. Well, Spy, obviously, the film is Melissa McCarthy is she's also like the least likely person in the film to be a spy. So that's why it works. But it's because it's a trope, it's a genre that he's sort of like, he's playing with general genres, so they sort of work better. But Ghostbusters is an IP. It's a very specific thing. And so people came into it with specific expectations. And I think that comes down to this idea of world building. Like, if you are going to do a different version of Ghostbusters, it's not a problem. Like, if this had been really well done, I'm pretty sure it'd have taken off. It just needed that world building and some realization of what the audience, where the audience was coming from, I think.
But that's an interesting conversation. So lots of the discourse around it, where obviously there was the patriarchy in play, but lots of the discourse and lots of the people who made the film believe that one of the biggest issues was nostalgia from fans about the original film. Do you think that comes into play in a lot of the criticisms?
Oh, I do.
As well?
I do. Yes, it does. However,
so okay, yeah, I was about to say. So, how do you feel that works with something like The Matrix? So there's a new Matrix film coming out, but it's still Neo.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples of reboots where they've done this. Like, there's always going to be nostalgia. Like, there is massive. I mean, I don't know if you know about it, but like, there's people who call themselves ghost heads. Like, they are the cosplayers. Like, they've got like fully screen accurate proton packs and neutrino ones, and there's a shortage of and film, like some of the later films and have suffered from a problem of the fact that there was a shortage of the Cadillac ambulances because of the number of people that have bought them to then have their own Ecto-1, that sort of thing. That's how dedicated these people are. So there is definitely there's a very niche, very specific audience. But I'm trying to think of other examples where it has worked. Like, there's been reboots and people have gone, actually, I'm fine with this. And I'm thinking of, like, it sounds daft, but like Star Trek or Spider-Man's
rebooted every few years.
Yeah.
Batman's rebooted every few years. But what are those films about?
Well, they're all about men, and I get that. But I'm trying to think of the gender flips or anything else where they've done something similar.
But why would they? Because you gender flip like this in Ocean's 8, and then apparently it's a big pile of shit without people seeing it. So why would people reboot with a gender flip?
Well, that's true. Because there is a commerce version. This is there is a commerce argument to this, isn't there? That, like, bad. Because Ocean's 8, I thought was perfectly suitable. I actually thought the film was
I'm not going to go running around in the street saying it's amazing, but it's fine and it's entertainment. And as I've talked about before, we get so much mediocre entertainment starring men all the time, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm fine sitting down and watching a film. I'm like, yeah, that was all right. I'm pleased that I spent 2 hours watching it, but it's not blown my mind. No,
I actually think that Ocean's 8 was too short, if I'm honest. I think that was compacted into too much. Like,
tried to cram too much in.
Yeah, but I watched that and was like, that it's one of the few films that was like 15 minutes more would have probably helped that film.
Yeah.
But you're right, there's definitely a nostalgia thing for it. And the thing as well is, again, how the film was sold, and there's this thing, because, everyone who went to see, there are female Ghostbusters fans, like, no doubt. But the vast majority are lads in the 80s and 90s who were brought up on the films and the cartoons and the toys and, all that kind of stuff. And so it's that thing of, like, if you're going to gender flip it, if you're going to do a gender flip, you've got to be tight on everything else. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be rock solid, and that's unfortunate. Do you know what I mean? Though, but like, you've got to prove.
But then why does something that stars women has to be held up to a higher standard?
No, I'm not talking about to a general audience. I'm talking about to the nostalgia audience,
right?
Because the nostalgia audience,
audience can just go, I love this original film. It doesn't matter if however many years later another film's made.
No, all right, yeah, but I thought, okay, for the nostalgia audience, I'm trying to make a point.
I do know what you mean, and I'm sure you could say I'm being a difficult woman, and I'd be very happy with that. But I say that as I am a nostalgia person. I love films, and if anybody ever tried to remake Back to the Future, I would hunt them down and actually murder them, because it's like possibly the greatest film of all time.
Yeah, talk about that. That's another one when I talk about perfect pacing, like that film.
Yeah, I mean, everything in that film is. There's a million YouTube videos, but everything in that film is absolutely perfect. The writing is the best, tightest writing ever. So I say this as somebody who can put my hands up and say, I would genuinely be upset, like properly upset, if they turned around and said they were remaking Back to the Future. However, and I love the original Ghostbusters. We watched it all the time as a kid. So I'd say, I still say it's one of the funniest films, all of those sort of things. I mean, it has many problems watching it now. At the same time, I don't think Ghostbusters 2016 gender flipped has anything to do with that original film. And I think that's okay.
Oh, no, I think you're right. But then tell that in the marketing.
Well, yeah, the market. I mean, should we talk about the shit show of the marketing?
Yeah, and I think that's what I wanted to get to again, because again, this is what I'm going to say about the nostalgia audience. Those guys, those men coming in, those first two trailers, or that first teaser was like, it's got the piano version of the theme. It's got this. It's got that. It was playing it up as a more action oriented version. It really didn't want to. And it told me that Sony panicked when they saw this. And they tried to hide some of the sort of the female-centric elements of this as much as possible for as long as possible. And I think that caused a massive problem.
And you see that now with the newest one. I can't remember what it's called. Apologies. That with the trailer for that and the marketing for that, they're trying to get that nostalgia audience back. And for me, I think that's going to be the failure of the film. I think they're actually going in the wrong direction. They've gone too far the other way. I've not seen it. I will hopefully see it and we'll hear my opinions then. But I don't have particularly high hopes for it because I've looked at the trailer and gone, oh, right, I see what you're doing now. You're trying to get all those little boys back on your side and actually just make something fresh and nice that everybody's going to enjoy. Like, stop pandering, like the final Star Wars film. Stop pandering to the fan base. Just go and make something good.
Well, and this is the thing when you say about make something good. I honestly think there's going to be a sea change because things like Dune that's just come out, Villeneuve's Dune, is one of those things where you go like, it's weird and it's big and it's 2.5 hours long and it doesn't even finish the story. Go see it.
I loved Dune. I loved it. Although I will say, once again, we have a story of a cis white man being saved of the world, but that's fine, everybody. No. It's fine. It's fine.
Stick around. Have you read the book?
That.
Have you read the book?
I say that, but I did absolutely love the film.
Okay. Have you read the book?
No, because
hold those
I know.
Yeah.
But still, it's very much presented as that, and that is to make it appeal to a particular audience.
Oh no,
and that's frustrating.
No, I agree.
And I say that as I love Denis Villeneuve so much. I think Arrival is one of the best films ever made, and I think he is incredibly talented. And I would, if he wanted to just, I don't know, film a street, I would watch him. I would watch that for like 4 hours because he's so ridiculously talented.
He's a fantastic. Why
does he make everything so pretty?
I know.
It looks so good.
He is an amazing director. But yeah, one day we'll talk about June. We were directors, but that thing about him being the white savior as well, because not only is it a gender problem, it's clearly sort of like, he's going to the desert people to make them better.
Yeah,
it feels for 2021. It makes me feel.
And they try really, really hard with that in the film. I think
they do. They really.
I think they have an incredible understanding of the source material, and of looking at it now through a modern day lens. To steal that from Jack and Tony, I think they've got a great understanding of that. Unfortunately, they also need to really stick to the source material, and that makes it troublesome.
Yes, but this comes back to this thing around source material and the IP, and this comes back to this idea of what people expect of Ghostbusters. And don't forget, one of the weird things is like, and you talk about the patriarchy and this idea of the male film, and would this, and because one of the early iterations of this film, before it became a full female cast, was a 2 and 2. 2 men, 2 females. It was going to be sort of like a mixed doubles version of Ghostbusters.
The Scooby-Doo cast, as I like to think of it when they do that.
Yeah, sort of thing.
It always makes me think of Scooby-Doo. Yeah. Such a weird reference, but every time I see them do that.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I think it was going to be sort of like, Seth Seth Rogen, and I think there was talks of others. So there was talk of doing that. But when you look at Ghostbusters as an IP going back, this isn't the fact that's not new. So when they did the extreme Ghostbusters, because in the 90s, in the 90s everything was extreme. You had a female Ghostbuster in that, who as a character has gone on to be incredibly well liked. She now appears in all the comics and other stuff. And then they had a disabled character in that, and a Hispanic character and a black character. So there wasn't no real sort of, well, the disabled guy was sort of cis white male, but like even he had he was in a wheelchair and stuff. It was a very diverse cast, and everyone was like, yeah, it's cool, we love that. Animation's very 90s, isn't it? Sort of some of it doesn't hold up, but apart from that, it's actually a really good cartoon. So it's that thing of like one of the questions people said was like, okay, we've sort of got a basis for this where you can do something diverse and different. Why not tap into that? And there was these. I remember the questions then going like, you've completely skipped over like the extreme Ghostbusters or this other.
And it's still a shame, isn't it, that it is 3 white women and 1 black woman. And I actually think that Leslie Jones, as we've talked about, completely brings it as sort of like the every person character, but it does annoy me somewhat that she is the African-American person who's not the scientist. And, I know that she's fine with that, and that's cool with me because she is a woman with her own agency and makes her own decisions. But it is also just like, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, she the character's incredibly smart. I know they say like she's street smart, but actually in general, she's just clever in general.
One of the things that she's like the historical encyclopedia, like she knows.
Yeah, right. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she just brings out all these facts and you're like, yeah, that's badass. But it is just like, oh, come on. Come on. We could have just had some more diversity.
And maybe does that sort of speak to other wider, the diversity is a wider issue, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a woke lefty liberal, so I would say stuff like that.
No, but it's true. I mean, again, if you look at like the SNL cast, and there's some people in there, you go, you could have, the woman who actually, again, it's about star power. Like everyone who's in this is a name recognition, and
I don't begrudge them anything at all. No. And I'm, and they should all be proud of. This is so patronising of the work they've done, because they all do bring it to this film. Absolutely, there's just something about it that doesn't click. And everything that they faced during the making of and after this film is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. So I'm not saying anything. I'm saying this if they're going to listen to this and just be like upset. I'm talking about, I'm not saying anything about that at all, because I think they are all amazing and they're all completely talented. But I think it speaks to the wider society that we live in, that we get 4 women being in the main cast for this gender flipped film as such, and 3 of them are white and 1 of them is black. I think that says a lot. Yeah,
and the fact it didn't make a great deal. People literally just refuse to go see it, which is ridiculous.
Which is such bullshit.
However, I wonder if it didn't. There's a leg. I want to get to a legacy issue or a legacy question around this, and we'll talk about Afterlife, Ghostbusters Afterlife in it shortly. But there's one other thing we talked about, the comedy, and the style. But one of the things that sort of works and stood out, and I talked about with the other guys for 84 and for Ghostbusters 2, is there are moments in each of those that are legit horror.
Yeah.
Whether it be the library ghost in the first one, or the terror dogs, or Sigourney Weaver being possessed, or the severed heads in the second one. Some of the bits, like there's bits of like legit horror.
Yeah, the second one, like a baby's kidnapped.
Yeah,
by a weird, scary nanny ghost. It's absolutely terrifying. I was watching that as a kid and I was like, this is absolutely terrifying. Why am I being allowed to watch this?
Well, I mentioned to Max, the bit that really always freaks me out, even as a kid and now freaks me out, is the bit when Janosch comes to Dana's apartment in the blackout, and then his eyes become like torchlight.
Yeah,
and he looks around the corner. It gives me goosebumps. It's so freaky. But yeah, like that film has got like legit. It's not scares, like it's not designed. It's kiddie horror, but it's still got some edge to it. It's got
yeah.
some
I mean,
horror
it's got
to it.
that classic 80 things of
Yeah.
children's horror is actually terrifying.
Yeah,
Because in the 80s, everybody just went, "Oh, kids can handle anything; they'll be fine."
That's right.
And, and now we're all just like traumatized adults in therapy.
That's right, exactly, as it should be. But there's that thing of like, there is that thing of like, yes, this is a PG. Oh, what's it got in it? Well, it's got a ghost, skin peels off, a zombie taxi driver, and and the MPA or the BBFC have just gone, yeah, no, we're good with that. That's fine. Crack on. And then you get sort of like the mid-90s, and all of a sudden they're like, oh no, we can't have scares. No, and it all becomes thingy. But for 2016, it so leans into the comedy that there is no horror in this film whatsoever. The only thing that's creepy in this is the mannequin, when the mannequin comes to life.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yeah.
Because you know how I feel about doll type things as well.
Yeah. And again, it's Leslie Jones. Like, her response to that is brilliant.
Yeah.
But there's no other part of this that feels like horror. So when it comes to the stakes, I'm like, yeah, I don't feel invested in that this feels like it's a real problem. It feels like a comedy problem.
Yeah. And another thing that really contributes to that, which actually Mother Half pointed out, so he was watching like the Formula One and I was watching this on the iPad, and he just turned to me and said, they really are like relying on visual effects. Visual effects can just ruin a film, can't it? And he's 100% right. It has the problem of poor Star Wars. I keep bringing up Star Wars, of the Star Wars prequels of it's so fake it doesn't feel real, and a lot of films from the 80s have that because it had to be a mixture of practical and visual effects, but also they couldn't do a lot of visual effects, as Jurassic Park taught us, right? It's so much more effective when you don't see the dinosaurs. It's bloody terrifying. And so the problem with this film is the classic, they just show everything, and everything's brightly colored and silly, and you're just like, I just don't care. I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, at no point. Well, the thing is, when you watch the original and even 2, you feel like I know they're going to succeed. I know they're going to do fine, but I still feel like there's stakes, like there's a threat. For example, like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is silly. He's a literal 100-foot marshmallow man walking through New York. Yes, tasty. But like I say, when he then catches fire, when they start hitting him with the beams, and then the fire sort of goes up the side of the building and stuff, like, you're like, oh no, shit, this is like legit dangerous. Like, this feels like, it doesn't all look fabulous in 2021, but like watching that as a kid or even as an adult, like I still feel like there's, they're nuts. They are trapped between a flaming marshmallow man and the gates of a different dimension. Like, this feels troublesome, if somewhat, and the same with like 2, you get this tension, like they can't break the slime mold and they've got to get some sort of thing to unify New York. With this, it just sort of like, it's them just sort of going, yeah, we're going to turn up and we're just going to win. We're going to have a fight the fight in the streets. Never, it feels like a day glow parade rather than any real threats. And I think that's a problem.
So weak in this film as well. So weak. Yeah, I hate the villain in it.
But that's this comes back to another part of the. We'll get to that as a problem actually, because I have an idea, and I wanted to ask you a question, your opinion on this. But I just want to finish off on the special effects.
Sorry,
no, you're not in the horror. Because one of the things I love in the other 2 films is they both have, because they both, I ain't gonna lie, Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, if you play them at the same time, pretty much the same shit happens at the same time. Like, they didn't push themselves with Ghostbusters 2. Like, the timings are pretty much on par. But when the shit gets real at the end, in the first film, you say we've got the zombie taxi driver, you've got Slimer comes out with eating all the hot dogs, and you've got other stuff going on. And in 2, the woman's fur coat comes to life, and you've got this thing, the thing under the arch, the big ghost, and then like the Titanic arrives, and you've got the guy rings up and it's like the Titanic's just arrived. You've got that great moments where you're like, no, New York has gone nuts, and New Yorkers are scared. And there's obviously this reputation of like 80s New York. It's like if 80s New Yorkers are struggling with this, like it's bad. In this, it's sort of when it all goes wrong, it's a comedy fest. Like everyone's running, but it's all a bit like
There's no stakes.
No. And there's a scene in this. I've seen the deleted scenes. I'm so glad it's worth seeing because it's interesting. But I'm so glad they cut it from the final film. When Kevin is possessed, and he's at the hotel, and all the soldiers and the Homeland Security turn up, there is a dance number that was filmed where he makes them all. You know, he does that thing where he's like, huh, and he gets them all to do their arms up. That turns into a full dance routine. And they obviously went, oh, it's going too long, we'll cut that. Now, to watch it, it's funny as a sketch. But again, it's this thing of like, it's not funny in the film.
Yeah. It's not funny or scary.
No. And that's the problem. This film is not scary in the slightest. And so when it gets to when the villain, which we'll get to now, finally sort of becomes the big bad, I'm a bit like, it doesn't feel like anything. So let's talk about the villain in this. So, right, we have talked about male response to this film. Do you think that this film is trying to antagonize a certain section of the male audience?
What do you mean, making Chris Hemsworth be a himbo?
No, I'm fine with that because Chris Hemsworth is hilarious.
He's the funniest thing in it.
Yeah.
And the prettiest thing in it.
Yeah. And who wouldn't call their dog Mike Cat? It's and
I love how much he just commits to this film, like full on commits to it.
Well, he did not want to be outpaced, so he ad-libbed stuff. Like, you know when he does the gong and then closes his eyes. And he says, "Oh, that's really loud."
Funny.
That's all him.
So funny.
That's all
and
him.
I'm now really worried I'm going to start doing it because it's really funny. It's the sort of thing my toddler does.
Yeah, he is a toddler, isn't he? I love the fact he is like a child in this, and he's so innocent. But no, the villain in this is. It made, and this can sound weird because I know it's going to sound like a bad comparison, but it made me feel like think of Joker. And it's this thing again of cis white male under pressure is always gonna lash out. And it's like,
the girl didn't ask me out.
Exactly, but they take it to the extreme in this, and he is played as this complete loser. Like, yeah, I'd pick on him, to be perfectly honest.
I just so right, I have this issue where I think it is like the Joker. I think you're right. Like, it almost glorifies unfortunately this is in real life, but motivation for male villains shouldn't be the fact that they're a bit of a social outcast. Exactly. Unfortunately, it is because in real life, because you guys have been told all the time that this is your world and you should get whatever you want, that when you don't, you go, oh, it's so hard, cry, I'm going to go and murder people because you're a cunt. And a terrorist, by the way, as much as we don't like to say that about white men that go around doing these things, you're terrorists.
Not me. Just to be clear.
But it is... And I think that can be done well. Mm-hmm. Like everything, it can be done well. But I do think that's another problem with this film. I think the villain is terrible. I think it's confusing and messy. Like, you don't really understand, because the only reason, the way they show you that he's a sad white man is by him going around muttering to himself, being like, oh, these people are terrible, which I think has really terrible connotations about people who either have mental health issues or disabilities. Like, I don't like that connection. I don't like that at all. Also, you can just be a bit weird and still be a good person, or just a normal, okay person. Being a bit weird doesn't make you a villain. And I just, there's no motivation for me. And then when he turns into like the big, I don't know, ghostly,
the ghost
god
logo,
thing,
and
and then like he possesses Kevin, right? And then does all of these silly things with Kevin's body and makes him say all of these stupid things. I'm like, it's completely at odds with who he was beforehand. Surely, like, his motivation, if we're going to stick with that character, would be that he wants to destroy all of New York because everybody's an asshole to him. It's just, there's a lot of messaging there that I do not like.
Well, this is the thing. You know, you mentioned Back to the Future before and world building, and that this is another problem with motivations and world building. If you want a villain to be like this, and it can be done, you need their motivation to be rock solid again, right? And the world building, it doesn't have to be. I don't want a big thesis on their psychology or why they're there. I don't give a shit. But I'll give you two examples where it works, or I think works better. Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen is a bully. Biff Tannen is an awful human being.
Yeah, he is just a bully. His entire motivation is that he is a terrible person who's a bully.
Yeah. But but the film, again, this is in Back to the Future 2, to be fair, but it's mentioned in the first one, is you find out he's raised by his grandmother and she is awful.
Awful, yeah.
And so you get this thing of like, he's had to be a bully to get by. And it's just become a part and parcel of who he is. And so there's almost this like, it's not enough for me to say he's a tragic villain, because he's not. But you get this glimpse and go, oh, actually, there's a little bit more there.
But you understand his character.
Exactly. And granted, that's in 2, but there's more of it in 1 as well. You get this idea. The other one I feel is, if you've ever seen Speed.
Yes.
So the Keanu Reeves film, which is again...
Start if I've ever seen Speed. Hasn't everybody? No, my other half won't have seen Speed because he doesn't like action films. So I was about to say everybody's seen Speed, but no.
How can people not like action movies? Action movies are pretty much the main sort of film. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But in Speed, the villain that played by Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins? No, Dennis Hopper. Why do I get those two mixed up?
Imagine what Anthony Hopkins would have brought to Speed.
Yeah, that's a very different film.
I think it would have been different. I don't think it would have been any better.
No, but it'd be very different. Dennis Hopper playing the villain that. You get this idea. He's holding a grudge. It's all about that. But you find out that like he has given of himself, literally, like, he's lost fingers and stuff because he was part of the bomb squad. And upon retirement, he just gets given a gold watch. And so there's this thing of like, I've lost my wife and my family. I've lost things for this job.
Yeah.
And so I'm now just pissed off. Like, I'm angry. I've lost my life to this, and now I'm going to take something back. Completely understand that kind of motivation. It feels human. It feels, you get the anger. I understand that resentment. I understand the frustration. But Ghostbusters 2016, like, yeah, he's just a twerp. I don't understand it. Like, he feels weak character. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just what I don't know. So, that
I agree.
Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think it's okay with white men being the villain.
Yeah.
With proper motivation.
Yeah.
It's okay with women being a villain with proper motivation. It's fine with anybody of colour being a villain as long with good motivation. The same with people with disabilities.
Yeah.
It's when it's just used as a lazy excuse for the villain that I think it's troubling.
Well, the fact is, like you say, they don't even give him, and I'm not looking for an origin story. I don't want to
No, but have like a flashback when he was in, I mean, this is a terrible example because I hate this example, but when he was in high school and nobody would go out with him. I mean, it's a bullshit example, but at least you'd be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, or even some drop dialogue. Like, have him have a conversation with someone that is able for someone to say to him, do you know what? What would have been a really good moment was someone to confront him and say to him, like, you've got to drop this bullshit victimization. Like, you've brought a lot on yourself. Like, you've just got to get out there. And that add to it, like, to the fact, like, if someone was to face up to him and make him worse, I'd be like, I'd buy that. Like, he's put himself into this victimhood and someone's going to trigger him even more. That would work for me. but they don't spend time on characters. They spend time on Melissa McCarthy going around like a deflating balloon on the end of a proton gun. and I think that comes to the key problem with this film that they want to show the physical comedy constantly, but for both, unfortunately, I think they're sort of at the cost of character.
Yeah, I agree.
But as you sort of pointed out, though, counter to this is Bridesmaids, which is all character.
Yeah.
So it's not.
It's so mad. I actually think like doing a comparison of this film to Bridesmaids is probably more fruitful than what we've been doing with the comparison to the original Ghostbusters, because you could see what these people can actually do together. Yeah. And I know you said you were like, yes, all right, but like actually bring something special to the screen, which they don't do in this. And and I can't figure it out. I can't figure out if it's they just tried to do it too quickly, they just didn't believe in it enough, or I don't know, but I just feel like the cast is really let down by the script, by the direction, by everything around it.
I honestly think it comes down to two things, because you're right about Bridesmaids being a good comparison, because that film is about two estranged friends coming back together, which is literally what Ghostbusters 2016 is about. Film, yeah. But then, like, one of the key things I think is I honestly think they said we can't recapture the lightning in the bottle that was Ghostbusters 1984. So we are going to go so far different. We are going to be almost unrecognizable as a thing. And I think that was almost one of the objectives. We've got to be so different, and we're going to do this thing. And so they did that. And then I think the other thing is, I think they recognize that there's so many comedy people in this that they let too many people ad lib, and some great lines, but it's a comedy outright.
Oh, yeah. Can you just say just one straight person? Yeah. Just not doing the comedy would have really benefited. This film would have benefited from that.
Even Andy Garcia as the mayor.
Yeah. What's he doing? Why is he being so weird?
Like, every character in this is trying to be funny. Like, when he's like, don't compare me, compare me to the Jaws mayor, or like,
so weird. Just be the straight man. It's fine.
I think it's too comedy, and that sounds daft, because I do love a good comedy.
No, I agree.
I'm against the comedy, but like, you've got to balance it against other things, which is why Bridesmaids works, because it's got heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and again, I've just thought of something else. I will say this finally before I shut up. And you and I think have a tendency to ramble or verbal diarrhea. So we akin in that way. I don't know what
you're talking about, and just adding in my Muttley laugh, my Muttley cough laugh.
There is a scene in this where they're called to the mayor's office, and I've just had this thought, and they are told about other paranormal, supernatural events that have happened.
Yes.
And one of them's like an entire town that disappeared, but they turned up inside out, like their skin was on the inside and their organs on the outside. Even that is played for a joke.
Yeah.
And it should be like that whole bit should be a straight thing where they're going like, this is not a game.
Yeah, like this is horrific. Like this is.
Yeah. You guys,
terrible.
You are playing at this. You think that you can turn up with your silly equipment. You don't know that the dark forces that are out there. This is the shit that goes on in the world. And I'd have had, instead of Andy Garcia, bring in like David Duchovny to play the mayor. Or even David.
Yeah, because then you get like the lovely nod. Fans would have loved it. Yeah. Like, oh, X-Files.
Yeah, exactly. Have him play the unnamed FBI agent that's going to tell them the horrors that are out there. Like, give it a shot.
That's what you're right. You're so right, because if at some point in this film somebody had just turned around to them and said, you need to take this seriously, because that is one of the things about the original, or even Bridesmaids or Spy. There's a point in all of those films where everything needs to be taken seriously, and the characters have to get their shit together. and so it could have been done. We know that these people could have done it. They've done it in other films.
And I think that's my biggest disappointment with this film. Is that, like, every time I watch it, because I do watch it, it's throwaway fun. Like, there are bits in this film that make me laugh out loud, like proper chuckle. Is the fact there's the disappointment that every time I watch it, I'm like, there was an absolutely fucking awesome film in here somewhere. And that's a problem.
That is the problem, and there are good things about this film starring women. You know, it doesn't have the male gaze, which is fantastic. At no point are any of them sexualized, or does the camera do what male directors and female directors just seem to do automatically, which is have a male gaze.
Yeah.
At no point does it have that. At no point, you know, is there a romance or anything like that. There's so many good bits in this that could have been explored more than the comedy, and that could have made it better. And that's what's so disappointing. And like we've said earlier, I hate this. I hate it when people say, oh, you know, because it's got women, it should be held to a higher standard. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this film deserved better. Yes. Whether it's a all-female cast or not. But one of the exciting things about it for me, as a woman who loves Ghostbusters, is that it was a female cast. And then when you watch it, there's nothing in there. You know, it's not like the Tomb Raider films where you have to perv on Lara Croft all the time. There's none of that. And that's empowering. And yet they can't provide a damn good script for it.
It's one of those where I think, like, if this had gone through like a script polish, just somebody else had gone like, no, do you know what? You bring it back, as it always seems to be, is like, just pull it back a couple of notches, try this. I just think this would have benefited from that, and given it that heart and that edge. I think it really would have needed to feel like, you know, actually this has got some clout and something about it. But yes, anyway, so any final thoughts on Ghostbusters 2016?
Apologies, that was a short break for a cough. I just think, like I've said, I do feel like we've probably been overly negative about it, because it is often easier to focus on that. But I think my disappointment more comes from the potential for it. And it's almost as if, you know, the absolute negative reaction was awful, and the criticism around it from supposed fans and, you know, from other supposed journalists and stuff like that aren't valid. I do not think they are valid at all, but it does play into that narrative by not doing justice to the actors in it. And I think that's a real shame. I think that's the biggest shame of the film. I enjoyed watching it when I watched it the other day. It was like a Sunday night. It was nice just to sit and watch it and watch some women be funny and not be perved at and all of those things. And I enjoy that. But then I get to the end and I just feel so deflated. And it makes me sad that, because of the reaction both before the film and then when the film came out, and I think it's like technically a flop, even though I don't actually think it is. It just wasn't as successful as some other films. It makes me sad that they never got to improve on that. That they, you know, that the newest one, Afterlife, isn't a continuation of this. And I think that speaks volumes that people took this film and said, oh, it wasn't as successful as it could be. Oh, all of the people with the backlash, they were correct. And instead of just going, hey, well, let's listen to some of the actual valid criticisms and try and do a second one, they just went, no, let's not do it. Let's just give up on female Ghostbusters. And that, I think, is bullshit.
Yeah. I honestly think if this had been given a second shot and given to a different director, I know it's Paul Feig's thing or whatever, I honestly think give it to a female director.
Yeah.
You know, there is Patty Jenkins. There's a few others got kicking about that I think could have really, you know, having seen, forget Wonder Woman 84, that's a car crash, a vile car crash of a film. But Wonder Woman is ace. You know, there's other female directors I'm sure are doing like small indie comedies and indie films. I'm like, they can bring the character stuff that we want. Let's them have a chance.
I mean, it's like I've not seen Eternals,
I've
but
not seen it
suddenly
yet,
watched
no.
Nomadland and went, there you go. Here's
Yeah.
a big Marvel film for you, you know.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is, again, we talk about this comes down to commercials. I think you're right just to sort of bounce off your points. Is I think the biggest disappointment of this film is the potential. Like I said, I watched this film and I'm like, there's an amazing film in here somewhere. I wish it had been that. I do enjoy this film. Like watching it for this discussion is the second time I've watched it this year. So I do enjoy it. It is good fun. It's a bit of, I don't want to call it a bit of fluff because that's horrible, but it's a popcorn film. It's designed to be a popcorn comedy.
That's totally fine.
Yeah, it's fine. And I think like you say, it could have been tighter and it could have explored more. And I also think you made a really good point that compare this to Bridesmaids. When you go, here's a film about a group of women dealing with their sort of relationships and it being funny and doing some crazy and some risque things, but introduce that into a Ghostbusters environment, and I think you'd have had a much better film. But yeah, one of the things I should say is this wasn't the end for the female-led Ghostbusters. It was on film, but IDW have the rights to the Ghostbusters, and they obviously have a fantastic comic. And this crew had a 6-issue series called Answer the Call, which is very, very good. And then they have appeared in an interdimensional. So there's a multiverse of Ghostbusters in the comics, in which the comic Ghostbusters which is supposed to be the movie Ghostbusters, have met the real Ghostbusters, the extreme Ghostbusters, and they have now met the female Ghostbusters.
Oh, I love it.
And Holtzman winding up Peter Venkman on comic page is one of the best things to ever beheld. So if you do like this, to listeners, go track it down. It's IDW. You find it on Amazon. It's just Ghostbusters Answer the Call. I think the other one's called Ghostbusters Crossover 101 or Cross Event or something like that. Interdimensional crossover. But you can find them. But it's actually really good. Excellent art, amazing art. But the characters are sort of a bit more defined. And so they've taken some of the criticism we've had, not that they've ever listened to us, but obviously it came out a few years ago.
I mean, of course they have.
Yeah, but they clearly recognized it and they did something about it in the comics, and the characters come across much, much better.
Oh, that's so good.
And weirdly, that was quietly accepted by the fan community.
I wonder if it's a slightly different fan community.
The comics ones is slightly different.
Yeah.
But they're good books. They are very, very good books.
So then my final question to you then is, when my daughter is old enough, do I show her the comics books first, or do I show her
No, you
this
need to see
film first?
you need to see the film first.
Okay.
Because the film does inform the comics.
Right. So the comics build on the film.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think the comics sort of set literally within a year of the events of the film.
Right.
So you sort of the film sort of comes first. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like mandatory, but it's definitely sort of helps understand what's going on in the film, in the comic. But anyway, final 2 questions, and one of them I was supposed to mention to you before we started, and I haven't. So but I'll drop it on you. But first one is, we mentioned Afterlife. What are your speculations and thoughts on this so far? So you already said you've got low expectations. So I'm curious just to get a final few thoughts on it.
I'm really over remakes and reimagining and rebooting. I'm not engaged with it at all because I'm not remotely interested, and not anything to do with the 2016 film. I'm just like, why are we doing this again? Much like the new Home Alone film, I'm sure it's going to be lovely and it's going to fulfill a lovely hole for people and people enjoy it, but I just don't care. But with that out there, I think there's a nostalgia element that they're trying to bring in, that I very much see from the trailer, and I do think that is due to the backlash of the 2016 film. Doing it with the sort of younger cast members, I find that really interesting. Like, is the film actually aimed at young people?
Mm.
And if not, then why is it younger cast members if you know your audience is our age? Like, I think that's where a lot of my hesitancy about the film is as well. I just don't know what it's pitched at or why.
Yeah.
Like, is it a fun Halloween adventure film, or is it a film for Ghostbusters fans, or is it something else completely different, which is fine? But I just can't tell.
No, it's interesting that you say about that, because the marketing isn't, again, it comes to think about marketing. Like, they've clearly held back, because the original four clearly aren't in it, because Harold Ramis has died. But the character of Egon appears in it. Like, this is a generational thing. And as far as I'm aware, and I've avoided trailers for the last couple of weeks, and this final trailer has dropped and it's apparently full of spoilers. The Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson will appear in it. So it's more, I think it's supposed to be like a baton passing kind of film.
Rather than a reboot.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is, from what I understand, is, and this is from Reitman, who is the son of Ivan Reitman, who has done this, has said that this is a family film. And he says this is not just passing the baton for the characters, this is for mums and dads who love the original to be passing on the franchise to their kids. And so it's that sort of kind of thing. So I'm hoping it's almost like but it's almost like Goonies or Monster Squad, or those kinds of 80s.
So my question is, so Jason Reitman's saying, which is fine, that people who loved the original Ghostbusters passing it on to their kids. Why can't they just show their kids the original Ghostbusters? Well,
they should.
I'm so cynical about remakes and reboots and all of these sort of things. It's terrible.
Let me put this into your brain. Yeah, it'll make money for someone.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm dancing around. But we
also live in the era of what they call, or what I like to refer to as the Lego sequel.
Yeah.
What happened 30 years later? So it started with, if I'm perfectly honest, it started with like Rocky Balboa and Rambo in the early 2000s. And then we got Blade Runner 2049. There's other examples, but this is just in that vein of what happens 30 years later or 40 years later from the events of Halloween Kills is another one, like the Lego sequel, this idea of there's been a long stretch of time, let's go back and revisit those characters. And, we can now go back and see these aged characters and see what's happened, and this just sits into that slot, I think. And so it's there to make money. It is. I'm very excited for it, but that's just because I'm a big
and I think that's fine. Also, I don't get to go to the cinema anymore, so I'm also like, I'm not going to see it for ages. Everybody will talk about it. I won't be able to engage in any of that discourse because I don't want any spoilers. And then I'll see it in 6 months' time and want to talk about it, and nobody will want to talk about it with me.
Oh no,
will remember
call me. We're still like, yeah, that was great.
I'm so excited. We went to see Dune in like the first week it came out. We went to see it in IMAX, and it was amazing. And nobody else had gone to see it because everybody was just like waiting a little bit because, I don't know, some other reasons. I was like, I'm finally watching something at the same time as everybody else, but you're not watching it. Yeah. What is wrong with everyone?
Julian and I saw it first week, but because we wanted to talk about it. So there was that of like, I've got to get in because we've got to talk about this. But and I have thoughts about it. Go check out the bonus Stories Out of Time and Space review, ladies and gentlemen. It's on the feed. But yes, so I'm looking forward to Afterlife. I think there's some great stuff in it. But final question. This is it. This is the outro of this. And I've asked every guest this, about whether it be fans or doing the reviews. And I'm interested actually because I didn't realize that James is your brother. And so he gave me his answer. So I want yours now. Is, do you believe in ghosts?
No. But I also think that you shouldn't just not believe in things. As in, like, and I'm not talking about like crazy fucking people. Yeah. That came off very wrong. I'm not talking about like people with legitimate mental illnesses, although conspiracy theorists one would say, have legitimate mental illnesses. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Going on there. Yeah. No, I don't believe in ghosts. But if somebody turned around and said, "Oh look, there's ghosts," I'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool, totally." I'd be like, "Yeah, all right," because who the fuck knows? But no. And I also don't believe in ghosts, because whenever there's any stories about ghosts, unless it's Casper, they're all evil. And why would all ghosts be evil?
Yeah.
What was Jack's answer?
Jack was a very strong no. Yeah,
Yeah.
very rational, very pragmatic. It's clearly a family thing.
Yeah, I just like, there's clearly not ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts?
This is the thing. I do and I don't. It's that thing of like, I want to. I don't believe in like, the most haunted or like, paranormal is like where they go out and every moving thing is supernatural. But on the other thing, I watch a lot of those sort of like, things on YouTube where it's like top 5 scary shitting videos. I'm an absolute like fool for them. But
I mean, I love it all. I went and stayed in a haunted hotel in York, specifically because it was haunted, and I was like, if we don't see a ghost, I'm going to be pissed off. And we didn't see a ghost, although we did hear something running up and down the stairs. My theory is that's the staff that do that to freak out the guests, which, first of all, genius, and I will stay there again just for that experience because hilarious. But also, I was like, we're clearly not going to see any ghosts because ghosts don't exist. But if we did see a ghost, that'd be ace. Yeah,
it's one of those of like, I know people that have told me of their experiences. I've had like things that you could probably explain away. Only one really. But I don't know. I sort of want there to be ghosts, and not because I'm religious. I'm atheist. I don't believe in heaven or hell or God or that. But I do believe there could be more to.
Yeah, totally. There's clearly aliens. We can't be the only thing in the whole entire universe. That's bullshit.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I don't know is the answer. However,
also, I don't believe in ghosts because I have sleep paralysis. My sleep paralysis is a demon witch figure who will often start in the corner of the room and then come onto me next to the bed and then sit on me on the bed. So I know that's, even though it's terrifying at the time, I know it's a very rational thing, where some people be like, oh, well, that's a ghostly thing. And like, it's clearly not. When you're seeing orbs on your baby monitor, because there's always posts and videos about that, it's not orbs. Go dust your fucking house.
Grab yourself a duster, love.
Yeah.
Clean your baby's room. I've had that. Oh, like, yeah, I've seen that. Especially, it's always somewhere that's really dusty. This warehouse is full of orbs. Shocker.
But at the same time, if you think that seeing your granny, if you think that you see or hear your granny and that's a comfort to you, then that's lovely. I'm not going to shit on that. I mean, I will, but not to your face.
Just on a podcast.
Yeah. But like, genuinely, if that's something that brings you comfort, like religion, I'm not religious at all. I do not believe in any of that stuff. But if that brings you comfort, lovely.
This one video is one of those things. I watched hundreds of these videos, and some of them do freak me out. I like them because they've got that horror element where I'm like,
I love being scared.
Yeah. But there's one that I often think about, in that there's a TikTok or an Instagram filter. And what it is, it's one of those ones that, it's sort of, you put your hand in front of the camera, and then as you move your hand about, it leaves a rainbow blur effect behind. And so this person's got this, and he's sort of got his hand out and he's doing this, then sort of like his dog runs past and that leaves one. He's this is kind of cool. And he lifts it up to the corridor and there's no one down the corridor. And then all of a sudden this figure of a person moves, like, and this thing shimmers, and he's just like, oh, fuck that. I'm constantly like, I got this app. I was like, I'm downloading that. And then as soon as I downloaded it, I was like, hang on. I don't think I want to know. Get rid of the app. Get rid of the filter. Don't want to know. So that video is always sort of like stuck with me because it proper creeped me out. But yeah, no, I don't know. It's interesting to see who does and does not say. Like Max has got a great story. It's on the podcast.
Okay.
He's got a fantastic story that's very weird. It's very sort of like glitch in the matrix or ghosty or whatever. It's very cool. So it's a story worth listening to. But anyway, we shall lead out there. So I shall leave it before we go any further. So Rhea, before we finish off, tell us where people can find you and Femme on Film.
Yeah, I have to do that bit, don't I? So where am I? You can find me on Twitter at Rhea Carrigan, RIACARROGAN, and then obviously at Femme on Film as well, which is Femme on Film Pod. That is also on Comics in Motion. So I've got my second episode coming up soon with the wonderful Tonya Todd. We'll be doing Grease 2, which I haven't seen since I was inappropriately young to watch it. And it is a weird ass film. So we'll be talking about that, which I'm really excited about. I'm also with the Pop Gorillas, so you can find us at the Pop Gorillas, and then doing Indie Comic Spotlight with Tony on Comics in Motion. Basically, Jack was like, do you want to come on and do some nevers with me? And I said yes, and now I've just like taken over this wonderful, amazing thing that he was doing, because I just like to talk all the time. So I'm just rounding about.
It's
Just
excellent.
find me. Come find me. Have some chats.
Comics in Motion is a fantastic channel. It's a great
Oh,
network
so
of
good.
shows. All praise.
Although don't do what I did, which is set your phone to automatically download all of the episodes, because you will do that and then it'll do all of them and your phone will completely break and die, and then you'll have to reset it, and then you'll lose every single podcast that you've ever downloaded. And it takes up a significant chunk of your day when you're supposed to be working.
It does. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, but it's a great network. And there'll be all the links down below. So go find Rhea and Fem on Film. But ladies and gentlemen, from my point of view, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoy listening to what we do, go onto your podcast catcher, leave us a review, preferably 5 stars, but any feedback is good feedback. We appreciate all of it. And if you really enjoy what we do, if you want to support us at 20th Century Towers, whether it be for 20th Century Geek or Stories Out of Time and Space, go onto our Patreon. It's patreon.com/2020 CG Media. That's patreon.com/20CG Media. We've got all kinds of things on there. We've got a weekly podcast we do where we look at the Twilight Zone, and we've got monthly ones of me rambling called 30-minute thoughts, and then also I bring on a creator every quarter to do different bits and pieces. We've got all kinds of things going on over on the Patreon. Go check it out. But anyway, go check it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. Rhea, thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
No, it's been a blast. I've really enjoyed this. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll talk again soon.